TestNG Automation Testing Framework, ready-to-speak explanation, 5 to 7 minutes. 1. Introduction, 30 to 40 seconds. TestNG is a testing framework for Java that is commonly used with Selenium for web automation testing. In our project, we use Selenium WebDriver with TestNG to organize, execute, and manage our automated test cases. TestNG provided features such as annotations, assertions, grouping, parameterization, parallel execution, listeners, and reporting, which helped us build a structured and maintainable automation framework. 2. Framework architecture, 45 to 60 seconds. Our automation framework was designed using a hybrid approach, combining TestNG with page object model and data-driven testing. The major components were: test layer contains actual test scenarios. Page object layer contains page locators and reusable methods. Utility layer contains common functions such as waits, screenshots, and browser utilities. Test data layer manages test data. Configuration layer maintains URLs and environment-related information. TestNG layer manages execution, grouping, dependencies, and parallel testing. Reporting layer generates execution reports. This structure made the framework reusable, scalable, and easier to maintain. 3. TestNG Annotations, 60 seconds. One of the important features of TestNG is its annotations, which control the execution flow. For example, @before suite executes before the complete test suite. @before test executes before the test section. @before class executes before the first method of a class. @before method executes before every test method. @test identifies the actual test case. @after method executes after every test method. @after class executes after all methods in the class. @after test executes after the test section. @after suite executes after the complete suite. For example, we can initialize the browser in @before method, execute the test using @test, and close the browser or perform cleanup in @after method. 4. TestNG Test Design and Organization, 45 to 60 seconds. We organized our test cases based on business functionality. For example, we could have separate test classes for login, customer management, payments, search, reports. We also use TestNG groups to categorize tests such as smoke, regression, sanity, functional. For example, during a production deployment, we can execute only the smoke group instead of running the complete regression suite. 5. Assertions and validation, 40 to 50 seconds. We use TestNG assertions to validate the actual result against the expected result. For example, after login, we verify whether the user is successfully redirected to the dashboard. We can use hard assert execution stops when the assertion fails. Soft assert allows multiple validations before reporting failures. Assertions are important because simply executing the Selenium steps is not enough. We need to verify whether the application behaves as expected. 6. Parameterization and data-driven testing, 45 to 60 seconds. We also use TestNG for parameterization and data-driven testing. Using a data provider, we can execute the same test case with multiple sets of test data. For example, for a login test, we can provide valid username and password, invalid username, invalid password, blank username and password. The same automation method can then execute with different datasets. This reduces duplicate code and improves test coverage. 7. TestNG XML and execution flow, 50 to 60 seconds. We used a testing.xml file to control the execution of our test suite. Through the XML file, we can specify which test classes should execute, Which groups should execute? Parameters. Parallel execution. Number of threads. The overall execution flow was TestNG XML test class page object methods Selenium WebDriver application assertions TestNG results report. For example, if we want to execute our regression suite, we can configure the required test classes or regression group in the TestNG XML and trigger the execution. 8. Parallel execution, listeners and reporting 50 to 60 seconds. For large regression suites, we used parallel execution to reduce execution time. TestNG supports parallel execution at different levels, such as methods, classes, or tests. We also use TestNG Listeners to customize execution behavior. For example, when a test fails, a listener can trigger actions such as capturing screenshots, logging failure details, updating reports. After execution, we generate reports containing pass or fail status, execution time, and failure information. This makes it easier for the QA team to analyze failures. 9. CI/CD integration 30 to 40 seconds. Our TestNG framework can also be integrated with CI/CD tools such as Jenkins. For example, Jenkins can trigger the TestNG suite after a code deployment or based on a scheduled job. The flow can be developer commit build Jenkins TestNG suite Selenium execution report result. This supports continuous testing and helps identify defects early in the development lifecycle. 10. Conclusion 30 to 40 seconds. To summarize, we use Selenium WebDriver with TestNG to build a structured automation framework. TestNG helped us with test execution, annotations, assertions, grouping, parameterization, parallel execution, listeners, and CI/CD integration. Combined with page object model and reusable utilities, the framework became maintainable, scalable, and suitable for large regression suites. The main benefit was that we could automate repetitive regression scenarios, reduce manual effort, improve test coverage, and execute tests much faster. Strong interview closing statement. If the interviewer says, "Explain your TestNG framework in your project," finish with. The key advantage of our framework was not just Selenium automation, but the way TestNG helped us manage the complete test execution lifecycle, from organizing test cases and managing test data to parallel execution, failure handling, reporting, and CI/CD integration. Remember this interview formula. Selenium equals browser automation. TestNG equals test execution and management. POM equals maintainability. Data provider equals data-driven testing. Listeners equals execution customization. Testing.xml equals suite control. Jenkins equals CI/CD execution. Thanks for watching. Hit the like button if you learned something new today, and subscribe for more hands-on QA and automation framework content. Keep learning, keep growing.